So, hi everyone. I'm Andrea Scarfo. This talks about botnet research that I've done regarding the DNS queries that we see on our resolvers at Cisco Umbrella. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what botnets are, how they work, and then what we're seeing the threat actors use botnets for. So about me, so I'm a security research analyst at Cisco Umbrella, which formerly we used to be OpenDNS, so it was about 2 years ago we became Cisco. Before that, for 12 years I was a system administrator for various companies in California. So start out, what is a botnet? So it's infected computers that are working together to form the botnet, and they receive commands from a command and control server, so they can get automated commands. And a lot of times, like what you'll see here in this picture, is you can rent a bot. So an attacker will own an infected system and then rent the use of it out for something cheap like $10 a day, and then you can provide your own malware, so like your own dropper, your own rat, and get the use of these infected bots. So why research botnet infrastructure? Well, it's the infrastructure behind what's running all of these cyber crimes, like it's the infrastructure behind sending spam with malicious attachments, behind malvertising, behind rats, and ransomware. So if we can see where these servers are, then we can dig deeper and find more systems to block. But it's a hard problem to solve because there's millions of infected devices all over the globe. So there's not one central location where you can just say, this is where everything is coming from. Let's just deny all traffic from this location. Since they're proxied, and it's also a hard problem because now, like, you don't have to build your own botnet. Like, you can just rent one for $10 or so that someone else has already done the work to compromise systems and control them together. So that helps the spread of ransomware, is what we see mostly. Infections go undetected, so these systems and these businesses can be infected for years, and if they don't have good security, they don't even know that the machines are calling back to the servers. And then they're also leaking information and providing bandwidth to the entire botnet. So if someone wants to rent infected systems in a botnet and just use it to DDoS something, that's one thing that they're used for. So the life cycle of a bot, basically what we see is the first step is the infection and spreading. So you need to get your bot out there to infect the systems. So spam is one of the largest ones, or if you compromise a website with injected code, and also through malvertising. So once the system is infected, then the bot's going to try to make contact with the command and control server. And it does this, it used to be through a list of like static IPs that would be in the binary. But now that's easy to find through if you sandbox the code. So we see them using a domain flux or IP flux. So they'll register their domains, and then one domain name will use many different IPs over a short period of time, constantly changing the IPs. So it's always moving around. And then the bot will report back to the command and control server, and then at that point it can be used in whatever way. So it can be used as part of a DDoS, it can be used to send more spam, to send more infections, or it can just sit on a system and just become an info stealer and leak information. And then also after that, you want the goal is to evade detection. So they'll use these techniques of domain flux and IP flux to always be like proxied, so you can't find where the actual command and control server is located. So this is what you might see as a typical layout of how the botnet infrastructure will work. So on the first layer, you have the infected users or computers, and these are what are going to accept and carry out the commands that they get from the attacker. Another layer could be more infected systems, but they have the ability to act as a HTTP proxy. So between the bots and the command and control server, so it just adds a layer of hiding behind a proxy. And then you can have the third layer that's made up of usually compromised servers, and that's another proxy between the nodes and the backend. And the backend is the control panel where the attacker can manage all of his bots. So on our resolvers, we see all of the DNS queries that clients are making that are using our resolvers here. So the type of information that we're going to see about these botnets are domain names. Most of them are DGAs. We'll see a majority of them that are NX domains, so they're not going anywhere, they're not registered. We'll also see the IP addresses of the command and control servers, and then the name servers that they're run on. Some of the detection methods that we'll use is if there is a sudden surge of queries coming from our clients on through the resolvers to one of the domains. That's going to look suspicious, whereas there would be no traffic, and then suddenly there's 75,000 queries to this one domain name. That's going to be suspicious. And then the IP history of a domain is interesting because if they're using a fast flux, they're going to consistently be changing IP addresses like a couple times a day or every other day. And then so from here, this is where we'll start to pivot from domains, from IPs, name servers, or who is information, just to find more out about the infrastructure or to find more attacks. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go through how we would do some threat hunting on some of the botnet infrastructure. The example I'm going to use is hailstorm spam. So hailstorm spam is, we call it hailstorm because there will be a sudden burst of query traffic, maybe like 75,000 an hour all at once with these spam domains, and then you never hear from them again, and it just goes quiet. Most of the time it's just advertising spam, but if you pivot through the different IP addresses and domain names, you'll find actual malware. And when we see this, we see it on the Neckers botnet, and it's coming from usually all over the world, but mostly like Russia, Germany, some in the US as well. So if we start here with this IP that we've seen sending hailstorm spam, using a passive DNS information, we can see some domains that we've seen in the past associated with this IP address. So this example here is just using VirusTotal. There's tons of different passive DNS resources that you can use, and of course, with Cisco Umbrella, that's what I use just because I get a lot more. But these are some more domains that were associated with this IP, and I don't know if you can see them, but they're kind of like it's all pharma in this one. So I think I actually have a screenshot that Ben used in his before. It's the next one. So on this one IP, we saw 857 different domains on the one IP. And so here's some more of the Canadian Russian pharma fraud. If you were to click through, go to any of those domains in the other slides, this is what you would see. So they're still active now. They're still serving these pages. So then if we start to pivot through this other domain here that we saw hosted on the 95 IP, we can see that it in the past also used to resolve to a different IP address here, the 185 address. And on this, if you look at some of the domain names and just using VirusTotal, we can see that another researchers put in a note for this one that is associating this with the Yambo, I think they're called, pharma fraud. And Spam House has done a lot of investigation into that organization. One of the other IPs there that we pivot from, you just see more of the same. All of the domain names are related to, like your RX shop, medical drugs, so more pharma fraud. So if you're finding more of the same, spam, pharma fraud, let's try to find something different. So Locky, it's still out there. So we'll go through. We want to find something more interesting. So on this IP address, with one of these domains that was associated with pharma fraud, you can find this binary that we found that was spreading Locky. In the network callouts, after we ran this in a sandbox environment, you can see there where it's grabbing the images from the site that have to do with the drug, so amoxicillin, prednisone. So you're dealing with more of the same. And then if you look at the rest of the network callouts here, that IP address at the bottom is the actual C2 server that will have the Locky payload. So originally, in this sample, we saw it dropping the Locky ransomware and associated with pharma fraud, but the original attachment that that a user had gotten in their email was a fake UPS zip file, so pretending to be a package for them. So this is just our friends at abuse.ch showing that this C2 server had been around for a while, so they'd seen it associated with other Locky attacks. It's offline right now. So this one here is spam, more spam with Locky downloader attachment. You'll see on the 95 IP it does the HTTP requests to get the pharma fraud, and then the last IP address that we looked at before is the C2 server in here again. That's going to drop the payload. And then if you analyze the network traffic in a PCAP here, you could see the HTML of the actual pharma site being loaded. They're viewing it. And then, so this hash is showing where they're actually trying to compromise the system and turn it into a spam bot. So it becomes part of the botnet here and continues to spread more spam. So this is an example of one of the emails that would be sent out. once the system's infected. So it just continues to spread more spam. And here's all of the emails that were sent when we ran this in a sandbox environment. So it just, this one just went through quite a bit. Sent more spam out with more farmer fraud. And here, if we look at the actual IMF messages that are sent out in the spam, if you analyze the binary and the memory, you can pull out more domain names that are in here that are being sent. And if you look at any of these, it's just going to be more pharma fraud, some Russian dating sites, but you can pivot off of any of these and find more ransomware. And I think that was kind of quick, but I'm finished.
Plenty of time for questions, so shout out if you want. Or remain silent.
Thanks. So I get the feeling, looking at this, that you have a pretty good understanding of how these botnets work, at least how they spread and where they're going to. Detection is the hard problem, but understanding how these botnets work, what's the next step?
The next step with what we're finding is we kind of just want to see the infrastructure behind it. So we want to find the domain names, find the IP addresses, so that it just leads us down more, so we can just continue our threat hunting. So we find all of the IOCs related and just make sure that we can block them that way. And it always leads you down like a different path to find something new, something more interesting, because you can start researching one IP address and then it might actually later turn out to stop sending pharma fraud and just send some other type of attack. So it's kind of something that once we find it, we'll keep watching it just to see what it evolves to, because they'll use the infrastructure for other things if they already have those systems.
Anybody else? No? Oh, yes? Okay, so thanks Andrea. And